Media Network proudly presents a weekly exploration of various spiritual practices with renowned spiritual authors, coaches, teachers, and Dr. Tracy Brown, RScP.
And now, here's Tracy.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown. So glad that you have decided to join us for poetry, prayer, and practice this week. And I am excited about today's show for a variety of reasons. It has been a really amazing series that we've been doing recently. And I'm just really jazzed by the conversations that I've been having. And I'm excited about today's show because I know the conversation I'm going to have with the Reverend Sunshine Michelle Coleman is going to continue in that pattern. If this is your first time being exposed to poetry, prayer, and practice, I'm going to give you just the briefest of overviews. We really, in this show, focus on spiritual practice. And poetry is a big part of that. And we sometimes talk about how poetry can be used in writing it as a spiritual practice, kind of like journaling. But also we sometimes talk about our favorite poems and poets and how they inspire a deepening of spiritual principle or understanding how to apply spirit in your own life. Prayer is such a foundational activity or spiritual practice. And so I love the shows that we do where we focus on prayer and the power of prayer, or how to use prayer, or how to understand how a prayer works so that you can use it more effectively in your life. And then practices is because we can talk about all the spiritual practices. And what often happens is we end up talking about how there are a lot of things that are spiritual practices that people don't realize or don't think about as spiritual practices. So if you go through the archives, you will find shows that really allow us to take a different approach or to think about spiritual practice in a different way. And today with Sunshine Michelle Coleman, we'll be talking a lot about spiritual practice. And I don't know where we're going to go, because if you have been watching us for a while, you know that my big thing with this show is I wanted to feel to you like you are eavesdropping on a private conversation. Although we know it's public, but we don't script it out. We don't like have a meeting before the show and plan out here are the 5 points we will make. We literally allow it to emerge. And that in itself is a spiritual practice. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in Reverend Sunshine Michelle Coleman. Welcome to today's show.
Hi.
So I'm realizing that usually what I do, here are 3 things I know about my guest today, or here are 5 things I know about my guest today. So I don't want to skip that. So things that you might want to know about Sunshine Michelle include that she lives in the Oakland area in Northern California. And number 2, that she earned her doctorate degree couple of years ago, 3 years ago, maybe?
3, yes, you're right.
3 years ago, maybe. And so we may talk about that and the work that you did in earning your doctorate. And then number 3, currently, one of the roles that Sunshine Michelle plays is the role of senior minister and spiritual leader for Oakland Center for Spiritual Living. So those are three things about you. What else would you like people to know about you to kind of set the stage for where we're going today?
Thank you, Tracy, and thanks for having me on the show. I want y'all to know that I'm a lifelong learner. I feel like I'm always coming with fresh eyes to spiritual practice, even though I've been in spiritual practice actively for a lot of years, some decades actually. And I'm excited about what Spirit has to offer, even through the challenges. I'm getting more and more excited in learning how to really appreciate what the challenges bring me into my spiritual growth.
I recently was traveling and had dinner with a friend, and it's funny you would say that because we were having that exact conversation that, a couple of decades ago or 3 decades ago, we would have stressed out about a whole lot of things. And now it's way more common to say, wait a minute, what could this mean? Or what's the spiritual lesson? Or, instead of creating drama, we
Right.
allow it to be the source for some deepening.
It's what you call wisdom.
I love it. So when I invited you to be a guest on the show, I didn't know if you would say yes or no, but you said yes. What is it that um, inspired you to your yes?
Well, I enjoy everything that you do, Tracy. You're a great person in the world. I've talked about you from the pulpit and preached on some of your teachings. So I admire you in what you're bringing in the world. And of those three words, poetry, practice, and prayer, all of which I enjoy, spiritual practice came up for me. I got excited about bringing perhaps some new ideas about what I consider spiritual practice to be. Because we all are, I'm presuming many of us, let me not say all, many of us are, we do our meditation and we do our prayer and we do our journaling, and there are some typical practices that we do. And what I've learned is that over the course of my spiritual evolution, that other practices come to me that just kind of drop in, and I hear them because I'm listening to Spirit, and they're always so rich and juicy for me. So that's what I wanted to offer you. You're listening.
Okay, so we're going to do a deep dive on that. But before we do that, I'm just hearing in my head because I mentioned that you had earned your doctorate degree. I know that there are some people who are like, well, what's her doctorate in? Like, what, why? Tell me more. And that also can provide a bridge to spiritual practice.
Yes, it absolutely does. It's all wound up in here together. For me, the doctorate is about authentic self-expression and being your true self. And the way I believe that we can, a lot of folks are talking about authenticity these days. So a lot of folks are on that bandwagon. The way I'm hearing it is to do some self-reflection, peel, uncover, discover, recover. I have a lot of themes and concepts in my dissertation, and that's one of them, the putter process, PUDR, peel, uncover, discover, recover. From within, through your spiritual practices to and reconcile with what comes up. Because something is, if you're being honest, something's bound to come up. And then you turn the mirror this way to yourself and admit that to yourself and be vulnerable with yourself, so that as you express out into the world, you can flip that mirror and interact with people from that place of who you really are, who you've discovered yourself to be. And I believe there's a healing that happens when two people come together and are expressing authentically. There is a healing resonance that happens that vibrates out. That's how we heal in the community. So that's what my dissertation is about, which is all wound up into spiritual practice.
Wow. I like that acronym PUTTER. Peel, uncover, discover,
Discover.
recover.
Yes. Your true, authentic self.
I
Yes.
love that.
Thank you.
I love that.
Another one. Here's another one. The IDC factor, which is the I don't care factor. Basically, I feel like, and I've learned it myself, and that's why I became interested in helping others to discover that too. In order for me to stand up into who I really am, I had to learn not to care what other people thought of me, because that stopped me in my tracks sometimes for expressing, because I wanted to people please or I wanted to fit in. And so I had to learn not to care. Oh, I love you, but I don't care what you think. And I'm going to find my courage and my faith and my strength, and I'm going from there. That's the IDC factor.
Oh yeah, we need to like make t-shirts and mugs and have a book that's the IDC factor. Like,
Right.
how are you applying it today? It could be a blank journal, but every day you stop and
Look at
remind
there.
yourself. I love that.
Yeah.
And while we're laughing a little bit, I'm also seeing that that really is or could be a spiritual practice. If someone is trying to move into a deeper faith
Yes.
and is so habitually attached to human judgment or approval,
Yes.
that
That's
it
it.
really could be a spiritual practice of how am I applying, how am I redirecting my attention
Yes.
to the wisdom and the guidance of spirit instead of seeking the approval or the affiliation of some human being or some human condition.
You've got it. And I hadn't really thought of it in quite that way, for it to be a spiritual practice. Some of these concepts that are in my dissertation, but I talk about them all the time. My congregation knows about them because I preach from them. So that's how the academic and the spiritual has brought itself together. Here's another one. They're all integrated in. Bring 100. And what Bring 100 means, that's another t-shirt. How do we bring 100, right? What is that? Bring 100% of yourself to whatever it is that you're doing, even if the 100% that you have to give, listen closely, is only 10%. If you have 10% to give to this situation that you're in that may seem untenable and you don't feel like you can bring your whole self, bring 100% of the 10% that you have available, and you are doing the best you can with what you have, and you can strive to increase that as you go. It all integrates in because it's a spiritual practice, Tracy. I hadn't really thought about that, where we learn to focus our attention on spirit to show us how to do that. That's where the introspection comes in. How do I bring 100% of myself? What does it take? If I don't feel safe in this situation, it could mean that I need to speak to that or do something for me to feel safe enough in this situation in order for me to bring my full self. It's not just me bringing it. We have to create the environment for other people to help us bring the 100%. That's what you teach. Diversity and inclusion. I have to feel comfortable bringing me, and you have to help me feel comfortable bringing me to the table.
Yeah, that we create. Well, you probably know this, but a lot of people don't realize, for me, the work related to valuing diversity and creating environments that are inclusive, for me, it all starts from a spiritual perspective of
Absolutely.
it's up to us to create heaven on earth.
Yes.
And heaven clearly has everyone that has been created as a part of the experience. So if it's not a mistake that we are different from each other, right? If we were created and it's a divine idea that there are differences,
Right.
then my job is to behave guided by love and wisdom and harmony and unity and wholeness in order for all of us to be able to achieve whatever it is we're trying to achieve.
Absolutely.
So, I can't go, well, I guess I could. I don't go into, my corporate clients and explain it quite that way.
Right.
But my motivation for doing the work
Right.
is that we would have that kind of experience in all of the places we go. And what's frustrating for me is that we don't even have that experience in many of our spiritual communities. And so all of the work that I do around stained glass spirit is, we need to practice in our spiritual communities being inclusive and learning how to apply spiritual principle in an inclusive way. If we want to have any hope at all of taking it out into the workplace, into retail, into sports, into athletes, into anywhere we go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Melissa Harris Perry talks about the crooked room, right? And some rooms are built crooked, and there's no way that we could stand up straight into our full selves because they weren't built for us. So it could be either that we find a way to straighten the room, or we go build a different room in order for us to bring 100, bring our full self to the table, which is how we were created. We believe in the wholeness of spirit, the oneness of spirit. We all are created in that spirit of wholeness, and we express it differently, uniquely. But we're all whole. We're just different. Well, I prefer to say unique, because different kind of others people, I feel, because we're all different. So there you go.
I love this. So, okay, you were talking about bring 100. And I agree with you. It's like I can bring 100% of whatever I have to give. And as a leader, I need to create an environment where as many people as possible can bring 100% of what they have to offer.
Yes.
So that is that connection.
Definitely.
So take a deep breath. What spiritual practice or practices are really up front or at the top of the list for you personally in your life right now?
Oh, great question. I have several. I have some new ones hot off the press. There may not be as they're new in my world for me, right? I'll take anything and turn it into something. So I was doing a common practice of just sitting. I was called to just sit in contemplation, and what I heard about nothing in particular, and what I heard, which is a spiritual practice, by the way, listening deeply. To listen to spirit, you first have to know how spirit speaks to you. You first have to bring yourself quiet enough to even hear spirit, right? And then you have to act upon it. One of my favorite affirmations, it's an original: I hear and act upon my divine inner messages without hesitation. Those last two, without hesitation, that's the hard part. I hear and act upon my divine inner messages without hesitation. Because, as humans, we're the first ones to hear something, and then we say, no, not that. I didn't mean that. I want something else. Or we don't, no, if I go do that, that's not what faith is about. And that's not listening. Anyway, I digress. So I was simply sitting, and Spirit said, practice the presence of God. I heard with deep within me, based on the book by Brother Lawrence, 16th century monk. Here's the little book, Practicing the It's a little tiny book. You see how little it is? So I heard that, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, will I be able to go put my hand on that book on my bookshelf? Don't you know that as soon as I got up, Spirit took me straight to the book. So I started reading it. And basically what Brother Lawrence says, who was a monk that was required to do daily prayers, as they do, he was guided to extend those daily prayers beyond the requirement and take it into his daily practices of any and everything. As simple as washing dishes. So as I had sat, and was hearing this, I knew it was mine to do. So for the past month and a half, 2 months, I've been focused on practicing the presence of God. He did it all the time. And I said, let me try to do it. Let me do that in everything that I do. Don't you know that's the hardest thing in the world? Because just to walk from where I am right now, not far outside on my porch, I can bet you I might get sidetracked. I might forget. I might be somewhere else. We do that in meditation. That's okay. The point is, when you realize you've strayed, just like in meditation, you bring yourself right back. That's the point. So you just continually bring yourself. I call it the PPG. Obviously I'm big on acronyms, right? Practicing the presence of God. And so I've been doing that. I've just been, just bring it back, and focus. So now here's the next one, Tracy. This one's hot out. It's even hotter off the press than the PPG, practicing the presence of God. So then I have a parable. It's my parable. Can you believe I have a parable? It's like,
Absolutely.
am I allowed to have a parable? Anyway, so this was after practicing the presence of God. I went to my kitchen for something. I was headed somewhere. I went to the kitchen. I reached in the cupboard, and out spills a whole bag of barley, raw barley, after I had just had the house cleaner leave. Do you know how small a grain of barley is? It's little bitty. You have a whole bag everywhere. Do you know here's the thing. Lessons learned. I believe that as humans, we come here in order to remember who we are. So we go through life's lessons. We're always going to go through some sort of challenge, even if we live the best laid life. The point is, how do we allow those challenges to serve us? What are the lessons learned in what we're experiencing? How can we apply our spiritual tools? That's my line of thinking. And so there was this barley. First thing I heard was parable. And I said, wow, I can have a parable? Right. Parable of the barley. Oh, The next thing, I laughed. I laughed so hard. Mind you, my house had just been cleaned. I had barley all over my floor, and I did not intend to go get the broom and the dustpan to sweep up a bag of barley everywhere. And I laughed. The reason I bring that up is because I know that there was a short time ago, I would have been fussing and cussing and upset and mad and stomping and carrying on because I had to go do this thing with this barley. But the reason I didn't, I believe, is because I've been practicing the presence of God. Because I've been honing my spiritual craft and my tools that keep myself calm so that I can turn any situation that happens to me into a lifelong lesson. So as I'm sweeping, I'm remembering, practicing the presence of God, the parable of the barley. And here's how the parable goes. It evolved. How many grains of barley does it take for you to stay focused on practicing the presence of God? Is it just one grain or two, or is it a whole bag? How is it that it's like counting mandala beads or prayer beads or rosaries. We do that to keep our mind focused. We say a mantra to keep our mind focused. We can count barley from into a jar to help us stay focused on practicing the presence of God. So those are two of my spiritual practices, hot off the press.
Wow. Parable of the barley. We can all imagine barley all over our clean kitchen floor and what it takes to not be angry, stressed out, like any of that, and to be able to laugh about it. And as you're sweeping it up, become conscious of what actually is happening. Like you're not idly doing it, you're not thinking about what your next meeting is, but to see the beauty in it, the wisdom in it, is powerful.
I'm still finding barley.
See, that would be me. That would be like 6 months later. It's like, look, there's still barley over there under the counter, right? Under the ledge.
Here's another one. Let me give you another one. Can I?
Yes.
Okay. This one kind of evolved. So my message to you today really is the bottom line of the message is allow your spiritual evolution to guide you to new spiritual practices because they will show up. They will reveal themselves. So one of the ones that revealed themselves to me that I love, and it's a favorite, is a state of, I don't know how it happened. It just happened. Witnessing. I call it witness, where I call it my higher self. It's kind of like this voice back here or this mechanism that is observing me. So that when I go do something or I'm thinking something or whatever it is, it helps me to say, well, you sure you want to think about it like that? What if? It asks me questions for me to answer. It doesn't tell me the answers, but it's a state of witness back here that allows me to self-reflect. Remember I said, reflect on yourself and then do that inner work, and then you can express from a cleaner, more wholesome place of integrity. And that witness place, the more I lean into it, the more it shows up, the more it gives me guidance to be able to be honest with myself and to hear some things that are going on. It's like, well, what was behind that? Like, were you jealous, perhaps? Were you angry? Were you arrogant? And sometimes I go, arrogant? No, I wasn't arrogant. Ooh, it's like, oh, well, maybe so. Anyway.
And you are not the only one. It's like, the very thing that we resist or deny, especially deny with energy, it's like, oh, wait, let me back that up. So here's what I love about, so you referring to it as, the witness, because we've both heard people refer to either their intuition telling them what to do, and we've heard people refer to their conscience, like guilting them into something, or right, making them do something. So I love the energy of there's a witness who asks me questions so that they are witnessing me, but I also get to witness for myself how I'm thinking, what I'm saying, what my motivation is. So I know that I'm probably going to be journaling about this idea of the witness and how it's different from conscience and
Yes.
from intuition.
Yeah. And I don't know where it came from, but I believe it's always there. And until we leaning in is that's my favorite term. When we open up and lean into spirit, it's like I lean into this camera. You can see me closely. Tell me more. We open up. The chest opens. You open up to possibilities as opposed to being closed up. So when we lean into that, it just yields. It gives so much, and it's been so rich for me, so rich, and I just keep leaning into it.
And it's another word that sometimes people use is, oh, well, you have an observer, or you are an
Yep.
observer, or you can be an observer of your own experience. But I like witness even better than that, because as you're describing it, there's an observer that is also processing or giving me the questions to process. How is this in alignment with who I claim to be or who I aspire to be?
Well, and yes, you know why? Because it's all about life is about choice. I tell my people, it's like you can choose to be as miserable for as long as you want to, or you can choose to change that, right? So you can choose to listen to the observer or the witness or not. It's always going to be there, but you have to opt in. You have to allow it to be able to inform you. And then when you do and you get out of your own way, it requires vulnerability. Requires integrity. It requires accountability. All of those things are required for authentic self-expression. That's why that's my passion. And it will always inform you. It will always help you be your better self.
I'm feeling like I forgot to fasten my seatbelt before we started this conversation today. Like, oh, I really need a seatbelt, because like we're
I have a
going.
spiritual practice for that. You want to hear it? I got
I
another.
do.
I have a lot of them. As maybe another show, I am involved on the angelic realm, kind of, spiritual realm, higher realm space. And there's a lot that comes with that. But what happens is our energy fields, our energy and our resonance sometimes requires that we ground in, that we ground ourselves, because we can be fragmented, we can be distracted, our energy can be all over the place. And as a healer, as many of you I know are, we need to make sure that we ground, and we have a beautiful way to always ground another spiritual practice into, well, who I call Mother Gaia. Mother Earth will ground us, but we have to, the spiritual practice is to call our energy back, because sometimes we allow our energy to cast out. And some people will sap your energy if you allow it. They will leech on it. And especially those of us who want to help and who want to serve. So you call your energy back and you allow it to come back to you, and you cleanse it by allowing your highest, if you were to imagine your highest gold energy above your head, pouring through you, going all through your body, cleansing and purifying, going all the way down in every aspect of your being, and grounding down through your feet into Mother Gaia, so that she can compost that does not serve. She will, notice I said compost. She composts what does not serve, and you can have it sent back to who it needs to go to for them to be healed. As a healer, I have learned that practice is really important for me, I'm empathic, and I know I heal, and my energy is widening as I spiritually mature. And so sometimes I'm running really hot, especially in my spiritual community, and especially when I'm praying. Oh my goodness, it's like I'm literally hot if you touched me. And so I know that I'm casting my field out, and it's going wider, and that there's healing happening. I know it's happening. So that's why I've been told, bring it back consciously and then ground it down. And you'll find that it's like a grounding force, just like an electrical grounding force will ground you back into yourself.
So many practices like that have so much power because, in my opinion, because they're centuries old. They're the practices that grounded ancestors from many different traditions before we got so caught up in words.
Right.
We are so caught up in words and language and mental processing that if we don't know some of these things that really are more earth-based, are more connecting with the physicality of nature itself, we forget, or we don't know. I think there are a lot of people who just don't know.
Yeah.
So as you were talking, I was thinking about, not only earth-based religions or spiritual belief systems from Europe, but also African,
Yeah.
right, African traditions. And I mean, we're on the New Thought Media Network, and sometimes I am surprised that people don't realize that so many of the principles and so many of the beliefs actually track to African ancestral practices and belief systems. So this is a good example of why we don't script these conversations, because I mean, you and I have never had a conversation about that.
Right.
But it hits me that indigenous cultural practices from many different traditions are so important for us to include, even under our banner of New Thought, because it's the ancient wisdom.
Ancient wisdom, New Thought, ancient wisdom. There you go. That's it. And I have one more for you. One more. This is an old time favorite. I do it in my own kind of different way, and that's gratitude. The way I do gratitude now as a practice as I'm in the bed about to go to sleep, and as I wake up before I get, and I feel, talk about our ancestors, Tracy. I feel my grandmother when I do that, because when I can put my feet on the floor and stand up, I am thanking God right there out loud, saying, thank you that I am vertical and on this side of the veil. It wasn't my turn to go, so I guess I'm here and going to do it again. And I'm upright, vertical, and I have a bed that I just got out of. I'm able to open my eyes. Even if we don't have sight, I can hear. Even if we can't hear, I can talk. Even if we can't talk, we can walk. If we can't walk, there is always something to be grateful for. That we have a home to be in. That I have food to, I have money in my account to go buy some food. I have a car outside. I have gas in it. I have a neighbor right here. I have family and friends. You can go on and on and on. There's always something to be grateful about. And then as I'm laying down to go to sleep, I am grateful that I have this bed to lay in, and that I had this day, that I had this event today that went well, or that I learned this lesson and that was a challenge, but I know it's going to be all right, or whatever it is. There's always something to be grateful for out loud.
Always, always, always. Yeah, one of my favorite practices is not all that unusual, but it is one of my favorites and related to gratitude. And it is the same thing. It's got to be out loud, and it's, set the timer. Set the timer on my phone, or look at the clock and see what time it is, and say, okay, for the next 5 minutes, or for the next 7 minutes, or for the next 10 minutes.
Right.
I am grateful for, say that, start over. I am grateful for, I am grateful for, and just continue that sentence with a different ending for whatever that arbitrary time limit has been set. And I don't know, it's almost intuitive that I know when I really, really need to do that.
Yes.
And a lot of times it's not because something bad is happening, but it always refreshes me. It's like a reset.
It is.
On a very busy day, sometimes I'll feel that message of, I need to take a break, but that'll be the break.
Yes.
And I'm completely refreshed and ready to go back in and finish what I was working on.
Actually, what I found is that the PPG, the practicing the presence of God, always brings me to gratitude, because if I keep bringing myself back to spirit, keep bringing whatever it is that I'm doing, I somehow find a way through gratitude to come back right here to this moment, to this now forever moment. It's an eternal moment right here. I get to start over right now. Whatever I was bothered by right there, I get to start again right this minute. Start again right now. It's so great.
So here's something that has popped into my mind a couple of times. A few minutes ago, we were talking about how the wisdom comes easier now after many, many decades of doing spiritually grounding work.
Yes.
And I know that you have a son who is a young adult.
Yes.
And what keeps coming up for me is, how do you find yourself? Okay, I'll say it this way, but then I'm going to change it. How do you find yourself transferring this kind of spiritual wisdom to your son or to the next generation? So it may not just be Freddie, it may be at church or, at the center, the next generation. What have you done, or what are you doing? And what advice do you have for the rest of us, so that our young people don't have to be 50 or 60 or 70 before they are living from this wisdom place and using spiritual practice as their guide?
Oh, I love the question. First of all, is to know that they have to discover it for themselves, just like we are. And we are here to guide them, not to give them the answer, because after all, our answer is not their answer. It might be something totally different. And so my style and my way of interacting with the young folks is to kind of ask them questions. I asked one of our young people when I saw them, I said, and it caught them totally off guard and they wanted to almost run. I said, what's the good word for it today? And they thought about it, and so it was almost like I stumped them. And so we went into his godmother, who's a practitioner there. We both walked in together, and she ended up saying, "Oh, well, he's getting ready to go to." It was like less than a week to several other, on a trip to several different places and do all these different things. I said, "What happened? You didn't tell me any of that." Like what? And so, but I wanted to ask them. So here's what I said. Next time, I'm going to ask you, the same question. So or if I don't ask you, come find me and tell me what the good word is. And do you know when he came back off of that trip and he saw me and he just went, but I invited him. I was interested and I asked him a question. He got stumped, but I gave him a chance to think about it. And then we helped him out a little bit. And so that's my style, and that's what I encourage. My advice is to see how we can engage people, because it's their choice. They don't have to do it. So let's engage them and spur them on and help them be creative, and then they'll get going with the creativity.
I'm loving that. And it is a great reminder that so Ernest Holmes said, the most important things to do are to teach and practice, practice and teach. But teaching does not always mean lecturing the people or telling them the answer. So what you just described for me is such a powerful way to teach, by guiding people through their own self-discovery process.
Right.
And so you teach in a way by empowering them to identify the story in themselves.
That's it. And then you see the light bulb come on, and so great.
I love it. The only thing that I have found really frustrating, that might be a little too strong, but somewhat frustrating about doing the Poetry, Prayer, and Practice show is that we start talking, and then all of a sudden it seems like I look over at the clock and the time is up. Like, wait a minute, what? How did that happen? So as we begin to wind down on today's show, is there anything else, another practice, or just an overall way of thinking about spiritual practice that you want to share?
It's that what's coming to me as I think about poetry, prayer, and practice, I think of like poetry. Well, let me back up and say, like, my son is a visual artist. And so when people say, oh, where does he get that from? My response had been, up until a point I stopped, he didn't, I'm not an artist, but I'm a writer. That's artist. That's art. That's art right there, right? It's just a matter of the way we look at it. So when I think of poetry, I have sat down and let spirit channel through me and have written the best poetry. I don't consider myself a poet. So I would just say, let's not limit ourselves. Let's start fresh. I have this favorite thing called flip it. Let's flip our perspective. Let's just look at it differently so that we can lean into it and we can allow it to inform us to how to be the best me that I can be. So figure out ways to do that. Then you're living life out loud. That's our global theme this year. Living life out loud, and you're living to your highest potential.
Yes, yes, yes. So everybody, you can see across the bottom of the screen, if you want to know more about Reverend Sunshine Michelle Coleman, you can go to oaklandcsl.org and snoop around and see what's happening there, and also read her bio and contact her if you would like. Sunshine Michelle, what I know when I am doing my gratitude practice tonight, at the top of the list will be my deep gratitude for all that you shared on today's show, and just for having this gift of time to hang out just for a little bit.
It's been so much fun.
Right? And let other people eavesdrop on our conversation.
That's right. Thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
Yeah. So everybody stay tuned for next week. We're going to say goodbye to Sunshine Michelle. And I just want to remind you that Poetry, Prayer, and Practice happens every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time. And I hope that you will join us. And between now and next Tuesday, I can't encourage you enough to visit New Thought Media Network on YouTube or on Facebook and check out the other shows. There's daily spiritual practice every morning. There's prayer 3 times a day. And there are all kinds of shows on all aspects of New Thought and spiritual deepening. My name is Tracy Brown. I'm so glad that you joined us today, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Join us again next week, or watch on demand at www.ntmedia.org or youtube.com/newthoughtmedianetwork. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring. Learn more at www.ntmedia.org.